into this space. I hope everyone's doing well this evening. I hope everyone is chilled and had a great weekend. This week was an interesting week for me. A lot of things happened, some good, some bad. But starting the next work week, I lost a family member. My first cousin passed away, joined the ancestors this past week, and her homegoing services, celebration of life, was on yesterday. And she is actually the third sibling in that family that has joined the ancestors in the last 2.5 years. Her older brother transitioned, joined the ancestors in 2020. Her sister joined the ancestors in 2021. And then she transitioned in this year in 2023. So she is the youngest girl, and there are 3 siblings left out of 7 of them. So rest in power, cousin. Fly high, fly high. So that was one of the things that happened this week to me. I've had some really strange, well, not strange, I wouldn't say strange, but I've had interesting encounters this week. I went to Yorktown Beach here in the Hampton Roads area on Monday. I was off from the plantation, and I decided to go to Yorktown Beach. And I walked around for a while, and I was about to leave, and I thought I want to get my toes in the water and just, and so I'm standing there at the water's edge, and the water is coming up, and I'm getting my toes wet. And this woman walks up behind me. I didn't even hear her. She started talking, and she was from Jamaica. So, she starts talking to me, and she has these 2 sticks in her hands, and they weren't walking sticks. I guess they were sticks that she could dig down in the sand to find things. And she started the conversation. She was poking around at the seaweed, and she says, most time it don't come out as much as it has here. So I'm going to go get my bags, and I'm going to gather up some seaweed. She said, oh, they got nice seaweed. And I asked her, I inquired, I said, what do you do with this seaweed? And she said, well, I use it like mulch. I put it down in my garden, and I put it in my herb garden, and it makes my plants and my herbs and my garden grow really nice things. And I said, okay. And then I asked her, I said, well, do you use it for anything else, like for medicinal purposes of things of that nature? And she said, no, usually I just use it to make my things grow. And so I was asking her, well, what kind of herbs do you grow? And she started to tell me. She said, well, I grow this, that, and the other. And she said a specific herb, and the name of it escapes me right now. And she said, I grow that, that's good for fibroids. And I'm looking at this woman because I'm like, okay. I just had minor surgery back in December for fibroids. And she's talking. And then she said, yeah, I have a friend of mine, and she wanted to know if I had some herbs that I could tell her to get, for her fibromyalgia. And I'm looking at this woman now like, I think I'm the only one that can see her because I have fibromyalgia. So when she said it, I inquired. I said, well, I have fibromyalgia, so any herbs that you could suggest would be great. And she proceeds to tell me, she said, well, there aren't really any herbs you can take. She said fibromyalgia is a disease of basically trauma. She asked me if I had been traumatized or if I had experienced any trauma lately. And I told her I started with fibromyalgia when my mother and my oldest sister passed away so close together. A few months after that, I started having fibromyalgia symptoms, and I started suffering with that. So she told me, she said, well, you have to deal with the trauma. She said, that's internalized trauma that you haven't fully dealt with. And she said, deal with that, and your fibromyalgia will go away. She said, that's why doctors will give you stuff that just masks the pain. But if you haven't dealt with the trauma, it's going to continue to be there. So she said, deal with that trauma and get that out of the way. And I was like, okay. So we kept talking and kept talking. And I had my mother's sun hat on. And a bug had got in the hat. I could feel it crawling on the top of my head. And she was talking about something else. And I took my hat off so that I could get the bug off my head. And my hair is thinning on top. And she just stopped what she was saying. And she told me, she said, get you some rosemary and some ginger herbs. And she said some grapeseed oil. And I'm going to share this with you in case somebody else out there is having the same problem. I haven't done it yet because I just talked to her on Monday, but I am going to get what she told me to get. She said to get some ginger and, what did I say? Rosemary and ginger herbs and some grapeseed oil. She said put the oil in a jar and put the herbs in and put in a double boiler and let it boil so that the herbs can infuse into the oil for about like an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. And then put the jar in a brown paper bag and set it in the windowsill so that the sun does not directly hit it, and let it sit in the windowsill for 6 weeks. She said after that, you can pour it in a spray bottle and then use it on your hair twice a week. She said, and your hair, it'll grow back. And I said, okay. So I started to honestly believe that I was the only one that could see this woman, because she was telling me things about myself that I had not told her or revealed to her, but she was telling me things that I could use for specific things. And so this woman walked past us and she said, oh, you ladies look beautiful today. So I was like, okay, somebody else can see her. Although I was a little bummed about that because I kind of wanted her to just be there for me. But we had a conversation and we exchanged numbers. I gave her my number. She gave me her number, and we went on our merry little way. But it was interesting for her to read my life. I got a reading for free. And that was on Monday. And yesterday we had the ancestral ceremony. The June 10th is the Middle Passage Remembrance Day. And it took place in different places. I know that in New York, they were doing it in New York. And I know they were doing it in Charleston, South Carolina. We did it here in the Hampton Roads area. I don't know where else. They may have done it in New Orleans. I'm not quite sure. But it is a day that is set aside June 10th. And we honor and remember those that perished in the Middle Passage, those that were either thrown overboard or those who chose to jump into the waters and return to the ancestors rather than be enslaved. And it was very nice. We had poets and we had drummers, of course, and we have the original Black Panthers who are in full effect here in the Hampton Roads area. Shout out to those Black Panthers. Just seeing them out there just made my heart just so glad to know that we have brought back such an important force in our communities. So shout out to the Black Panthers here in the Hampton Road area. And that was my week and my weekend. And so I am chilled right now, just relaxing, and wanted to get this podcast out. I didn't do one last week. I'm a little tired from the plantation job, which I don't understand. I'm more mentally tired. Well, no, let me take that back. I was going to say more mentally tired than physically tired, but no, probably equally, because I'm expected to stand on my feet for 8 hours. At 4 hours at a time, of course, I get like a 30-minute break and then 4 hours again on my feet. And that's a long time to be standing without the option of sitting, because the supervisor or the manager believes that makes you look lazy. Okay, whatever. So I am chilled. This is Ancestor Day. Sundays are ancestral days for me. This is the day that I connect with my bloodline ancestors as well as my spiritual ancestors. And so we always dive into the ancestors and what I have learned from them on my spiritual journey, from Christianity to Judaism to African traditional spiritual systems. And the path that I have chosen, or the path that was given to me, is hoodoo. That is the path that I've taken, and still learning a lot about it, even though I grew up in it, just it didn't have a name. But I'm still learning a lot of things about hoodoo. And so our ancestor that we are going to talk about tonight is Bishop Charles Harrison Mason, the founder of the C.O.G.I.C denomination around the world. Is the largest Christian denomination in the world. And it is, well, maybe second largest. I think Catholic may be first. But among African Americans, C.O.G.I.C is the first among African Americans. And we're going to talk about Mr. Bishop Mason, who was a conjurer, a root worker, and practiced hoodoo. A little bit, we're going to talk about that. I want to talk about some of the other things about him that people don't know. Because when they talk about him, we know that he was the founder of C.O.G.I.C. Most of us, well, all of us know that he was a root worker and a conjure man. Some of us are in denial of that, especially those that are C.O.G.I.C. They don't want to believe that their founder was a root worker and conjure man, even though Jesus was a root worker and conjure man. And I may even do an episode on Jesus, the root worker or hoodoo man. I don't know. But tonight is going to be Bishop Charles H. Mason. And before we get started with the ancestors, I open up by saying thank you to the Creator, to the divine feminine and masculine energy, Father Sky and Mother Earth. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To my Mali Tuareg ancestors, I say Abene. To the Binyam and Yowale. To my Guinea-Bissau Balanta ancestors, I say Abene. To the Binyam and Yowale. To the Kelnat, I say Shukra. To the Inyama, the power that you give me. Thank you for your wisdom that you impart in me every day. Thank you for allowing me to hear your voice and to speak your words with clarity. Thank you so much for allowing my heart to still feel your love and support. And thank you for letting my hands continue the work that you began. And though I may not finish it and I pass the torch on, I thank you for entrusting me to the work that I do. Thank you so much for planting my feet firmly, giving me a strong foundation to work with. I am forever and eternally grateful to you, to my ancestors. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, Bishop Charles H. Mason. I'm going to read a little bit from Wikipedia because I don't want to miss anything. And this might be a short video, audio. Bishop Charles H. Mason was born in 1866. I want you to remember that date. 1866. He was born the son of former enslaved people, Jerry and Eliza Mason, in Shelby County, Tennessee. He lived with his family in an unincorporated area near Bartlett. He was a sharecropper, which is another word for slavery. As a child, Mason was greatly influenced by the religion of his parents. What religion do you think his parents were? Now, of course, they would have been in the public eye, the religion of whatever their enslaver was, and more than likely they were Christians. But were they white Christians, or falling under the structure of the white Christians? Or were they hiding exactly what they were? Because most of the time, those Africans that were enslaved, they had to hide their true worship. They would go down to what they call the brush harbor on Saturday evenings or Sunday afternoons after going to the white church. They used to turn buckets over, empty buckets over, so that the ground could absorb their sound of them praising and worshiping their God. The spirits would ride them, and so they had spirit possession. But it wasn't what they would call the Holy Spirit, more so the spirits of nature that they were communicating with in those brush harbors would ride them. So he was influenced, heavily influenced by his parents' religion. And this is 1866. I want you to keep in mind that up until 1808, they were still importing legally Africans into the United States for the purpose of slavery. So there was still a lot of African influence in the United States in 1866. Actually, up until probably the 1900s, you still had African influence in the United States. So if he was heavily influenced by his parents' religion, I dare say that his mother probably taught him about how to use roots and herbs to heal or hurt. Because that was the sole reason our ancestors that were enslaved used herbs. One or two reasons: to heal or to harm. His father probably taught him the same things, because it wasn't just the women who were root workers and conjurers. It was also the men. His mother saw something in him and wanted him to go into the ministry and to be a minister. Nat Turner's grandmother saw the same thing. She saw in him that he had a gift from the Creator and wanted him to use it in ministry. And that's when Nat Turner started preaching. So Bishop Mason, again, born in 1866, 1 year out of emancipation. His parents had only been free probably less than a year, because chattel slavery really didn't end until December 1865. And so if he was born in September 8th. So they hadn't even really been out of slavery, not even a year. So what religion were they teaching him? Certainly not about the love of Jesus, although that is what he eventually preached. But at a young age, I'm sure they were teaching him a different type of Christianity. And so Bishop Mason would use what he was taught by his parents and enter into the ministry. And he would develop C.O.G.I.C, the Church of God in Christ. At the time, I believe he was a co-founder of the organization. And him and the other person, and I can't remember his name, they parted ways. And so Bishop Mason, he took the name C.O.G.I.C, Church of God in Christ, and he became the leader for that. Bishop Mason is known for allowing women to preach. Black women. Black women who came up in his organization, in his church. He would groom them and allow, no, I don't want to say groom because that word really is a different meaning. He would mentor them, and they would preach all over the globe. They would go to Africa. They'd been to Europe. All over the globe, they would go, these black women preaching. So I believe that black women actually started preaching before white women did. And you have more black female preachers than you do white female preachers. Most of the white female preachers I see tend to want to mimic black female preachers. Well, the white preachers do anyway. But he was the first to allow women to go out and spread the gospel. He was an amazing, amazing man. But he also was a civil rights leader. Bishop Mason had been under investigation from the FBI. A lot of people don't know that about him. They investigated him. He was arrested. And his third wife, I believe the woman that he married last, she has a very short interview on YouTube. And in the interview, she's talking about the time that Bishop Mason was arrested and he was supposed to go before the judge. And the first time he was supposed to go before the judge got sick. And then the second time he was supposed to go for the judge had a death in the family. So they just dropped the charges and Bishop Mason had they let him go. And I'm thinking to myself, a judge got sick. And then somebody else in his family got sick. And he wasn't able to see Bishop Mason on either one of those occasions. Sounds like some root work, some conjuration, and some hoodoo going on to me. I'm just saying, that's what it sounds like. And so Bishop Mason was a civil rights leader. He allowed different people who were working toward social justices and working toward voting rights and things of that nature to come to his church and to hold rallies and different events. Robert Robertson went to his church before and held a rally, and Paul Robertson had a voting rally at his church at Mason Temple in 1948. And, drum roll, Bishop Mason was friends with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King's first speech was held at Mason's Temple in 1959. That was his first speech that he gave. It was for the Get Out the Vote Freedom Rally at Bishop Mason's Temple, y'all. That was his first speech. Dr. King gave his last speech at Bishop Mason's church in 1968 on April 3rd. That was when he was in town for the garbage strike. So Bishop Mason was more than just a hoodoo or root worker. He was an amazing, amazing, amazing bishop to his flock. His church is huge. I haven't been there in person. I've seen pictures of it. And I know a few years ago that they built a statue to Bishop Mason. And I think that is so cool. But his church, in 1945, his church was the largest gathering place in Memphis. It was the largest church owned and operated by African Americans in the United States. The 3-story building was constructed of brick, stone, concrete, and steel. The main auditorium, now this is 1945. 1945. The main auditorium seating capacity was 5,000. The balcony seated 2,000. The assembly room under the balcony also had the capacity to seat 2,000. The temple had a baggage check registration room, a post office, a barber shop, a beauty salon, first aid and emergency ward, a nursery, male and female restrooms and shower baths, a shoe shine parlor, and 36 administrative offices, 2 industrial kitchens, 2 cafeteria, a concession area, a photographic booth area, and an elaborate indoor and outdoor sound system, and a modern heating and cooling system. The cost of building the Mason Temple was almost $250,000. That is truly a church that built something for its community. And the mega churches that we see today, they don't have half the things that Bishop Mason Church had. And I don't know if the church that is in operation today still have those things. I would hope and pray that all of the work that Bishop Mason put into that church to give back to his community, for his community to have a place that they could go to for those things, I hope and pray that the church still operates with those things in that church. Because look at how many jobs were created by having those things in the church. Forget about the money changers. You need money changers in the church. Look how many businesses Bishop Mason put in his church. I don't know of any black church. I don't know. Some of you may know. But I don't know of any black churches that have those things in operation today. I do know of, there's a church in Richmond, Virginia, and the pastor has several churches. I do know that in one of the churches there is a cafe and a bookstore. But that's minimal. This is 2023 compared to what Bishop Mason was doing in 1945. The man had a beauty salon. The most things that churches, black churches, will put in their buildings now is an ATM machine. Because if you don't have a check and you don't have cash, then we got you. We'll accommodate you. We'll make sure that you have an ATM. Now, I do see a lot of black churches with ATM machines. I'm waiting for them to put the little slot machines in the churches as well. Because if you win, then you can pay your tithes. So I'm waiting for that to happen. But that is Bishop Charles Mason. I truly and honestly believe that he was a hoodoo worker, a root worker, and a conjurman. Look at the thumbnail of him. He's standing behind a table with all of these accoutrements of that type of spirituality. So C.O.G.I.C people, stop getting mad that your founder actually, taught what he was taught. He used the tools that was given to him by his mother and his father. And apparently those tools work because, again, in 1945, he had the largest black-owned church in the United States. And look at all the businesses that were operating, legitimate businesses that were operating out of his church. I am sure that the ancestors were pleased with him, with how he gave back to the community. He didn't even want to be a pastor or a bishop. He wanted to be a lay minister and really be in the pew and then go out to the communities. But I'm thankful to the ancestors for his mother for saying, no, that ain't your call. Kind of like Jesus's mother, when she told him to turn the water into wine, and he was like, yo, Mom, it ain't time for me. And she said, you don't get out there and get some liquor in them glasses. So kind of the same thing. Mason could have been our Jesus. Look at all he accomplished. Who knows? But yes. And another thing with pastors coming out of that time, coming out of slavery. In African spirituality, the priest, the ministers, they were also the healers. So in those days, you could go to the person, your pastor, your minister, your priest, for healing of the spirit as well as healing of the body, because those men were root workers. They were conjuremen. They were root doctors. And that's what they were looking for when they were searching for their praise house and their prayer houses and their churches. And that's why hoodoo was so prevalent in the black churches and still is. Now they want to call it witchcraft and they're trying to get rid of it. But hoodoo's always been in the black church. And as long as you paint your face and praise dance, as long as you have all of these different ministries, because white churches don't have all these ministries, as long as you do all of these ritual ceremonies, missionary day, pastor anniversary, choir anniversary, usher board anniversary, as long as you have these ritual ceremonies, hoodoo will always be a part of black Christianity. You ain't gotta believe it. You can deny it. You can say it ain't so. But I dare you to find a person who practices hoodoo that does not have a Christian background. You will be hard pressed to find someone. So tonight we salute Bishop Charles Harrison Mason, the hoodoo root worker conjure bishop, the civil rights activist, the entrepreneur, the community activist, the mentor for black women to preach all over the world. We salute you. We love you. We honor you. And we thank you. And forgive those who want to make you into something that you were not and want to forget your ancestors. Because in doing so, they disrespect you. Bishop Mason, Ralut. That is the end of this podcast today. It was short and sweet, but I wanted to really talk about Bishop Mason. I wanted to talk about some of the things that people didn't know about him. I had no idea about Dr. King preaching at his church. I had no idea about the size of his church and all the businesses that were inside of his church. It had to be like a block, you know what I mean? And it was a block that held all of the things that the community needed inside of that church. We need to get back to doing that again. We need to. All right, y'all. I am out. I'm a little tired. I got work tomorrow on the plantation. But I wanted to just come on here and just do a little something. So have a good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, good week, good weekend, whatever it is, whatever time you are listening to this podcast. Share it, please. Share this podcast. Again, there are some people out there that need to hear this message. A lot of people in denial. Everyone, you have a blessed one. Peace.
Just let me go.